now we are going to have a keynote from some amazing faith leaders. Our panel set it up just perfectly, talking about how faith is so important and that eco-grief. And I just want to say that I'm looking forward to the keynote address from Rabbi Judy Schindler, the response from Imam John Ederer. I'm going to be quick in my introduction because they're amazing. Rabbi Judy has been working on social justice in our community for as long as I can remember, and often through many challenging times. I remember going to Moral Monday protests with her in Raleigh. She's been a voice for the voiceless and the forgotten. She's the Scott Professor of Jewish Studies, a director of the Stan Greenspan Center for Peace and Social Justice at Queen's University in Charlotte. After 21 years in the pulpit, her website says she is thrilled to guide Queen students through thousands of years of religious wisdom. But she continues to be active as an author, a speaker, working on issues ranging from affordable housing, diversity in schools, to LGBT inclusion and restorative justice. She's Rabbi Emerita of Temple Beth El in Charlotte, and also served as senior rabbi and associate rabbi in Scarsdale, New York. And so we want to welcome you, Rabbi Judy Schindler, for your words today.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Can hear you great.
Okay, wonderful. Well, how inspiring. Oh my gosh, nonprofit supermarket. Jeremy, a student at UNC, leading the way, and my colleagues and friends, Dr. Sadler, Dr. Shipman, and it was great to hear from Dr. Jennifer and Jennifer Roberts. You are a true leader. Dear Earth, we come to you as people of faith from across the state and beyond. We come to you virtually because our world is sick. An illness extends across the globe, COVID-19. I know you can feel it, you can sense it, you wonder why we wear masks outside when the air that surrounds should be so beautiful and so perfect to inhale. Earth, you wonder why, when we head outside to enjoy the sun that shines so beautifully and helps your vegetation to flourish with glory, you wonder why we cover ourselves with glasses and hats, clothes and lotions to protect ourselves from harm. You cringe that we have come to fear rains and their consequent floods, winds and their consequent hurricanes, when instead we should be standing in awe of the miraculous cycles of your natural world that you bring day and night, winter and summer, a rich harvest balanced by nature's resting. We should be celebrating them and capturing their power to power our lives. We learned so many lessons during this time of isolation. Mother Earth, we've learned how beautiful you are. As we have stopped during the year gone by, we've learned that our busyness, so much of our driving, our flying, our racing from place to place to get somewhere and do something was at your expense and often unnecessary. We are called human beings, but we have forgotten how to be in relationship with ourselves, with our neighbors, and most of all, with you. The first question of the Bible, a book that is embraced by billions of people of faith, is, where are you? Adam and Eve get lost in the idyllic Garden of Eden, and God asked them, where are you? Today, as we are slowly emerging from the pandemic and from this year of unfathomable pain, filled with death and violence and poverty, we stop to hear and ponder answers to that question. Where are you? In Hebrew, the first question in the Bible, where are you, is comprised of one word, ayeka. Those same letters form the first word of Lamentations, echa, which means how the city sits alone. In Lamentations, God weeps because Jerusalem sits alone after the first exile of the Israelites. Our cities are alone right now, but they need not be. In Genesis and in Lamentations, we are called to return, to get back to our ideals. And that is what we do right now at this summit. O earth, we have taken you, your beauty, and your richness and your resources for granted. And as a result, we stand at a risk of disconnection, divorce, or even worse, death. In Genesis, we were given simple instructions to guide our relationship with you. Adam, the first human being, was created from Adamah, the earth. That first earthling was told that he and consequently we have a twofold obligation to the soil that sustains us. God placed Adam in the Garden of Eden, in Hebrew, le'ovdah ulshomra, to till it and to tend it. The word ovdah, to till, has the same root as the word avodah, which means both work and worship. Our relationship of working the land is a form of prayer. Boundaries were set so that as we labored over the land, we could protect it. One day a week, the earth gets a day of rest called Shabbat. 1 year in 7, the earth gets a sabbatical, a full year of lying fallow for rejuvenation, called in Hebrew Shemitah. In Judaism, nature is God's sanctuary. And caring for the environment requires sacrifices, which sadly we have failed to make. Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, is a Jewish mandate. The 16th century mystic Isaac Luria taught when God went to create the world at first, God needed to contract God's self to make room for the rest of creation. And so God contracted God's self into vessels, but the vessels could not contain God's light and they shattered. Much of the light returned to God, but some of that light still exists in shattered shards hidden in the material of our world. When we heal you, O earth, with acts large and small, we reveal and we release God's hidden light. Help us to be healers of your world. Modern Earth, Mother Earth. During this time of a global pandemic, we have learned that we are all interconnected. What happens in China, what happens in India, what happens in Washington, D.C. or Georgia or Portland impacts us all. Whether it is COVID-19 or political fighting or most of all, climate change. We have learned that we are all neighbors. Even globally, what happens to one of us happens to the next. Rabbi Joachim Prinz, who helped organize the 1963 March on Washington, and he spoke immediately before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rabbi Prinz said the following: our fathers taught us thousands of years ago, when God created man, he created him as everybody's neighbor. Neighbor is not a geographic term. It is a moral concept. It means our collective responsibility for the preservation of man's dignity and integrity. Mother Earth, in harming you, we have harmed our neighbors. Just look at the segregated city of Charlotte. It is segregated not only by race, but by socioeconomic status. We have this crescent and wedge reality, and almost all outcomes of our city are determined by the lot of land on which we live or onto which our children are born. Educational outcomes, health outcomes, exposure to environmental harm. And this pattern of disparate outcomes based on race and socioeconomic status is replicated everywhere across our country and our world. Mother Earth. The book of Psalms teaches that 1,000 years in your sight are like just a day that has gone by, like a watch in the night. You have seen religious leaders come and go for millennia, teaching and preaching lessons of collective responsibility. A first-century teacher, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the ascribed author of the Kabbalistic Zohar, taught about the ways our actions impact one another. Bar Yochai notes it's to be compared to people who are in a boat and one of them took a drill and begins to drill a hole beneath his seat. His companion said to him, "Why are you doing this?" And he replied, "What concern of it is yours? Am I not drilling under my own seat?" And they replied, "But you will flood the boat for us all." And almost 2 millennia later, Pope Francis, the leader of 1.2 billion Catholics, saw as one of his first and most significant acts the development of an encyclical on the environment published in 2015 entitled Laudato Si, Praise Be to You, with the subtitle, On Care for Our Common Home. Mother Earth, you are our common home. We are all in this together. Pope Francis expressed his concern for your health. Each year, the Pope wrote, sees the disappearance of thousands of plant and animal species which we will never know, which our children will never see because they have been lost forever. Mother Earth, the current Pope, expressed his concerns about the way your tenants are treating you. He wrote that the warming caused by huge consumption on the part of some rich countries has repercussions on the poorest areas of the world, especially Africa, where a rise in temperature together with drought has proved devastating for farming. Mother Earth, we come here today to reflect on our relationship with you. And just like in a large family where each child has a different relationship with their parents, so as large families of faith, do we all have different understandings of our connection. To whom do you as the earth belong? We ask as people of faith. The Native American poet and scholar, Dr. Paula Gunn Allen of the Laguna Pueblo tribe, offers one answer. She writes, "We are the land." That is the fundamental idea embedded in Native American life. The earth is the mind of the people as we are the mind of the earth. The land is not really a place separate from ourselves, where we act out the dreams of our isolate destinies. It is not a means of survival, a setting for our affairs. It is rather a part of our being, dynamic, significant, real. It is ourself. The Jewish, Christian, Muslim faiths teach that the land belongs to God. God spoke all creation into being. Psalms 24 affirms the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. The Quran in Surah Al-Zukhruf similarly states everything in the heavens and in the earth belongs to the Almighty Allah. But Mother Earth, we too quickly forget that. There's a Jewish folktale of two people who were once fighting over a piece of land. Each claimed ownership. Each bolstered the claim with apparent proof. After arguing for a long time, they agreed to resolve their conflict by putting the case before a rabbi. And these two individuals, they went to the rabbi who sat as an arbiter and listened carefully. But despite his years of legal training, the rabbi could not reach a decision. Both parties seemed to be right. So finally, the rabbi said, since I cannot decide to whom the land belongs, let's ask the land. And the rabbi put an ear to the ground and after a moment stood up. He said, "My friends, the land said it belongs to neither of you, but that you belong to it." Oh, earth, how easily we forget that you, the land, belong not to us, but we belong to you, and you belong also to the future. There is an ancient Iroquois philosophy called the seventh generation principle. The decisions we make today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into the future. The decisions we make must transcend ourselves and our families. They must transcend time. Daily, we need to think about the environmental inheritance that we are leaving. Rather than depleting your resources, thinking only about now and ourselves, we need to invest in them, oh Earth. Mother Earth, we have come together today for a summit to pay a sick call. We understand that not only has humanity faced a global illness of COVID, but that you, Mother Earth, are sick as well. Your temperature is increasing. Your symptoms are getting worse, and the longer we wait to act, the more you are struggling, and consequently, we are struggling with droughts, excessive rain, extreme hot cold, more tornadoes, and more intense hurricanes. Mother Earth, your diagnosis is alarming. The harmful effect of our centuries of exploitation, especially since the Industrial Revolution, have doubled the amount of carbon dioxide in your atmosphere. Burning coal, natural gas, gasoline, and diesel fuel are emitting carbon dioxide that are depleting your ability to support us. The prognosis is fearful. Our North Carolina barrier islands will likely disappear, and many of today's coastal communities will partially be underwater by the year 2100. The consequences of your illness will impact every person and every country. Mother Earth, we are so sorry for our neglect. We are so tired. We face local challenges, national challenges, global challenges, and all of them seem so overwhelming. The Talmud, an expansive text holding centuries of great Jewish wisdom, teach this awesome concept of 1/60th. The text tells us that sleep is 1/60th of death, that dreams are 1/60th of prophecy. We need to listen to our dreams. That Shabbat, our day of rest, the Sabbath, is 1/60th of heaven. And we're taught that a person who visits the sick takes away 1/60th of their illness. So we each need to do our 1/60th part and demand that our country does the same. We don't need to each do it all, but we each need to do something. The Pope, in his 2015 encyclical, enjoined the global citizen to act. An integral ecology is also made up of simple daily gestures which break the logic of violence, exploitation, and selfishness, the Pope writes. We should also consider, he recommends, taking public transit, carpooling, planting trees, turning off the lights, and recycling. We need to demand that our local and national leaders lead to save our world before it is too late. Like the patient in a critical care unit who faces a grave crisis with multiple doctors and disciplines who are needed to figure out the path to healing, we know, Earth, that you are in need of critical care. A local scientist, an expert on environmental healing, John Dobbles, shared with me that we need to implement science-based solutions, not political solutions. We need to use not just public funds, but insist on private funds as well. We need to ensure fair and equitable implementation across all socioeconomic groups. Mother Earth, your treatment requires a change of behavior. Our turning from dependence on fossil fuels to green energy, we need to set our target of zero carbon emissions from transportation by 2050, less than 30 years from now. Earth, the task of your rehabilitation seems overwhelming. When Moses was called to help save the Israelites from slavery, he asked with humility, "Who am I to save the Israelites from Egypt? I am slow of speech and tongue." And God appointed for Moses his brother Aaron as his accommodation and partner. And so we might likewise ask, who are we to solve this global crisis? Yet we have been given one another as partners. Moses felt apprehension in tackling an issue as big as the redemption of the entire people. How much the more so do we feel apprehension at trying to redeem the planet, our planet? John Legend, in giving a commencement address at Duke earlier this month, he told the graduates, when you feel lost in a tangled web of problems, know this truth. The way out of it is simple. It is instinctual. It is called love. Love should be your North Star. Let it guide you. What does that mean? He concludes. Love is ensuring everyone is safe from the worst consequences of the climate crisis, especially in communities already undermined and under-resourced and underwater. To paraphrase the Indigenous Australian activist Lilla Watson, it means that your liberation is tied up with mine. As Professor Cornel West says it, he has a word for what this kind of love looks like in public. It looks like justice. Mother Earth, today we renew our commitment to you as we recognize that the healing you need is not beyond our ability. It is within our grasp. It is within our hands. I close with a poem by Hafiz, a 14th century Muslim poet. It is called A Love Like That. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. The earth would die if the sun stopped kissing her. Oh, Mother Earth, may we, like the sun, kiss you and love you daily through our actions, tending to you, and thus honoring you, honoring our past, our present, our future, and honoring all. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Judy. What a great letter to the earth, and that image of paying a sick call on Mother Earth. Terrific. Wow. Well, we know that we're at an interfaith summit, and we know that every major religion has creation care as a central tenet. And our next speaker, in representing that interfaith connection, what it could be more perfect than to have Imam John Ederer, who is the current board chair of our interfaith network here in Charlotte. It's called the Mecklenburg Metropolitan Interfaith Network, or what we call MECMEN. Imam Ederer is an author, a speaker, and a voice for social justice and environmental justice in the community. He embraced Islam in 1998, has studied formally at the Islamic University in Michigan and the Daiwan Center in Egypt. He's also mastered Arabic, spent 5 years studying in Egypt and Kuwait, and has worked with the Islam Presentation Committee, promoting intra and interfaith dialogue. He returned to America in 2009 to start career as a full-time imam at the Islamic Foundation of South Florida, and is currently the imam at the Muslim Community Center of Charlotte. He has learned from scholars and mentors from various backgrounds, and is a proponent of a moral alliance of common good among people of scriptural morality to address our widespread social and political corruption and our environmental racism and pollution. And it is my pleasure to welcome Imam John Ederer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's a blessing to be here with you all today. I definitely will not do justice after Judy's beautiful, powerful, moving, standard presentation that she always gives. I'm honored to be on a platform with such a great speaker, an activist for all that is good for all of us. So yeah, I just want to thank June Blotnick and Clean Air Carolina. I want to thank Green Faith and Amy Brooks, and obviously Eco America and Jennifer Roberts, and everybody who's coming here to kind of springboard this work that needs to take priority among us. So I'm going to try to just go through our tradition as Muslims and transition a little bit in the Abrahamic family from the Isaac bloodline through Jacob and the Israelites to the Ishmael bloodline, and the founder of the city of Mecca and the forefather of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon all of the prophets. Again, the connection is there. In Arabic, Adama is referring to the earth. And it also actually refers to darkness in terms of the dark earth. So there's this rendition at the beginning of the Quran after God lays out the reality of believers, unbelievers, and hypocrites and the struggle of faith. Then he gives a call to humanity to worship God as their provider, creator, and sustainer. And he mentions that he has created all of you and those who came before you so that you will have an appreciation for the blessing of life and everything in it. So then he goes into the story of Adam and Eve. And the beginning of that is where God calls out to the angels, telling them, I'm putting a deputy on the earth. I'm putting a vicegerent, a viceroy, a representative authority on the earth. And then he pointed to this clay figure that he had called to be put together, which is Adam. And he said, this will be the one. And so the angels then questioned God, saying, why would you choose this one? It seems they have been made privy to future problems within our humanity. And he says, why would you choose one that will cause much bloodshed and turmoil and corruption in the world? And then God says to them, I know that which you do not know. And then after that, he highlights, after giving Adam life and giving him a place in front of them, he highlights the value of Adam and his progeny as his spiritual deputies on the earth. And so basically he says, Adam, tell these angels the names of the things around you. And so then Adam starts to articulate, as we saw the beautiful articulation of Judy earlier, something I will not be able to do, his explanation of things. And so angels only know what God actually tells them, whereas humans are able to innovatively, consciously come up with intellectualizing the world around us. We have a mystical connection with creation through an understanding. And so that actually is the only reference in the Quran to the concept of a caliphate. The caliphate is the human responsibility for keeping what is good in the earth good through divine inspiration, through our natural inclination to knowledge, and through the revelations that were revealed to give us specific direction in doing God's work. And so in that, we are conscious participants in the ecosystem of the world around us, and that knowledge is our guiding force, and that the golden rule is the fundamental intellectualization of caring for others. And so we actually have to go beyond the slogan of loving our neighbor as ourselves and actively study how to best love our neighbor as ourselves. And it starts in scripture, which is what me and Judy are coming from, a root in historical scripture of prophets. And then it goes into studying the world around us and how scripture would be applied. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his entire mission was summarized in the 21st chapter of the Quran and verse number 107. And we have only sent you for one sole purpose, and that is to be an act of benevolence, of compassion, of caring concern for the word that's used, al-alamin, meaning everything that you know around you. In Arabic modern science terminology, alameen is that which is known in terms of categories. So you have the alam al-ins, is the human kingdom. Alam al-nabatat, you have the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the insects, the meteorology and how the precipitation, these are kingdoms, these are realms. And so the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was sent as an act of benevolence to all of those things. And that is the fundamental calling of our tradition, as all prophets were also called to that. And you see it manifest in the Prophet's prohibition of cutting down trees and making a very strong exception in terms of it must be absolute necessity. You really need to cut down this tree for the big picture welfare. And he also made this very strong prohibition of not only just not harming or not killing an animal other than for food, and to be as humane in the process and to use a sharp knife and a quick cut that will relieve the animal of its life as quick as possible for the purpose of eating or for the purpose of using its hide. And so then he prohibited any harm or killing of any other animal, and he made the extensive clarity for us by saying on the day of judgment, any life form that was harmed by a human for no reason of benefit to our own, then that life form will be a witness against us on the day of judgment, and that our deeds will be siphoned from us. The goodness that we represented will be siphoned from us in order to bring justice to the crime. And so, of course, in every tradition, you have those that feel like, well, we have absolute authority over the earth. And so then that means if we can cut down all these trees and burn all these fossil fuels, well, these were made for our benefit. But there is a long-term holistic awareness of goodness that cannot be sacrificed for our immediate good. And all of the evil of humanity is described in this immediate concern for self-fulfilling desire in expense of the big picture of wholeness, of holistic nature. And so when we look in the Quran, there's this repeating phrase. It comes up in many places. وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Do not cause corruption. Do not spoil the earth, right? And the word that's used here is earth, meaning that the earth is a place that was meant for goodness and wholeness. And do not cause it to become corrupt or decrepit or foul. And so one verse highlights this in a very important focus, recognizing and maintaining beauty in the earth. So in chapter 7, verse 56, God says, "La tufsidu fil ardi ba'da islahiha." Don't cause corruption of the earth after it was made good and whole by its creator, right? So we should recognize the goodness around us and the wholeness, and then think many times before we would ever even consider causing destruction of something that was there for our benefit already. And then he says, indeed, inna rahmatullahi qareebun min al-muhsinin. Indeed, the mercy of God is close to the altruists, meaning those who don't think for their own selfish desires, but they look for the welfare of others by their action. They look to make it a priority of thinking of the big picture of everyone's benefit over their own personal gains, which is the corruption of all bad politics, to centralize personal value and gain, or to make it in a small group's benefit inexpensive everyone else's. So there's a simple way to address this from a faithful perspective, looking at this issue from this scriptural reference, that it is obvious that we are destroying the earth. No one can deny, if they actually know and see, what is happening when we destroy the rainforests, which now, to my knowledge, 40% of the Earth's rainforests have been destroyed in the last 100 and some years since the Industrial Revolution. And that is the lungs of the Earth. There are millions of life forms and trees that are the means of oxygen. We're seeing the carbon go up and the oxygen go down. Every year, this is a statistic fact. We are destroying the Earth. Right? There's no question. We look in the oceans. We look at A Plastic Ocean, the documentary. We look at plastic that we're using and what it's causing, and how we're still trying to figure out a way to get rid of it. And we don't have a real substantive way of getting rid of it. We are piling the earth like that, movie WALL-E, when we see what will happen to the earth. That is a very realistic depiction, the very creation care oriented thought process to look at the big picture long term if we continue with plastic. When we look at the industrial crops and monoculture, the facts tell us that crops should be made locally. It shouldn't be that we wipe out whole swaths of area and then we just take out the human and the earth's life force, the organic elements, and how crops were meant to be tilled by divine order of things, and then we erase the divine order so that we could do it quickly and make as much money. So now we just put one type of crop and it ruins the soil permanently, and it ruins the earth. So we're called not to ruin the earth. So once we realize that, yes, before we say, okay, there's climate change and we see now the changes on the earth, let's first agree that we are destroying the earth. Once we see that, burning all these fossil fuels, we see the smoke. We see all of the carcinogens and all of the chemicals that are in that smoke. Those things are not naturally in the air. We are adding that to the air. You cannot deny that. This is the fundamental truth, that we are destroying the earth. And so we must rally around that so that then we can look to solutions and we start to see that we have gone to an extreme in our desire to make things easy and make things make a lot of money as quick as possible through technology. And so technology is not always a good thing when we see the harm in technology. So we have to go from one extreme to another. So if we've been destroying the earth and all of these cars and these planes and all these things are destroying the earth, all of this industrial corporate cropping and all of this meat being eaten and what's happening as a result of all of this meat being eaten, when we look at the effects of that, then we need to move to another extreme. You can't say, well, let's just go back to a median level once we've caused a major imbalance. In our spiritual tradition, you have to go to like if you have a problem with greed and you're struggling with that, our scholars tell us that you need to keep some money in your pocket every single day and literally force yourself to go give something away to someone, every day. So that's a very prophetic sense of altruism and benevolence, but you have to push yourself to do that. If you have a problem with gluttony, you need to fast a lot. So it's a lot. So this is the solution. And once we get things back to normal through our knowledge, which God empowered us and gave us status with, then we can start to come to a level of a medium addressing of the issue. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, we're just going to put a tax on the carbon print. We're going to do this and see. Now we're starting to change a few things. No, we have gone to a massive extreme, and all of the science is telling us that we are moving away from a habitable earth. So we have to go to another extreme. We have to think outside of the box. We have to get together and mobilize. So the Quran highlights a very serious warning that we're seeing come true today in chapter 30, verse 41. And it says, corruption has spread throughout the land and the sea by the earnings of the hands of man. As such, God will cause them to feel the pain of their bad actions so that they might return. And so this verse now is being highlighted by so many scholars as very relevant to the issue of climate change and climate creation care and climate destruction. And so first he says corruption. So the same word that's used if you go spreading a racist or a oppressive system of governance on people, that's corruption. But also, if you let food spoil or you don't slaughter and relieve the meat of its blood and all of that, then you're going to cause that will spoil. And the same word for corruption is for spoiling, whether it's the natural world or the physical actions of humanity and the impact. So he says corruption is spread throughout the land and the sea by the earnings. And the word that's used here is earning, kasaba. It's the same word used for earning money, kasaba. If you asked an average Arab in the street, what is your kasab? He'll say, I work here and they give me money and that's how I pay so it's literally about earning. And so we have to realize that we have an inclination to cause destruction through the desire to earn money. And we will destroy things and people around us so that we can have power of wealth and to consolidate wealth. And then he says, by the hands of man. He doesn't say by the actions of man. The hands were given to us to do good and to help and to be a helping hand, right? The hand of God is about power. It's about mercy. It's about comfort. that is what that's about. And so we should be that for others. We should not be the hand that strikes and harms and causes destruction. And so he says that when you cause this corruption in the earth, God will then bring back the punishment on the masses if they don't choose to rectify it. And so we're seeing this pain in the massive changes in the climate of the earth. And so he said, perhaps they might return. So the plural is used in so many, in every single command in the Quran. And the Quran addresses all mankind in many places. And it addresses believers in the scripture and the prophethood of Muhammad. It addresses the Israelites, Ya Ahl Kitab, O people of the book. God is talking to everyone in this final testament he sent to Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And there's this collective need to come together, this plurality of the work of God, and leaving God to judge the religious convictions and the actual deeds and the sincerity behind them for something that will happen on the day of judgment. But the directive and the command for people to work together is fundamental, because that path, it helps us to appreciate each other's situation, our understanding of reality, our feelings, our pains, our difficulties, and we feel more inclined to help when we actually work together. If we stay in our own groups, we only understand our group's perception and we only work for our group, which is why the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, sent to probably the most tribalized community in the history of mankind. And he made statements like, leave tribalism, or dare I say nationalism, because it is putrid and filthy. And he used the same word that the prohibition of corrupting and spoiling, that tribalism and nationalism, this racism, all of these things are meant, and they're created to divide, to gain power. And so we will appreciate that if we work together as human beings in our causes of doing what is for everybody's welfare, seeing, as Judy so beautifully pointed out, that I am you and you are I. We are one humanity, part of one creation, part of one life force created by the one God with one fundamental purpose, and that is to bring goodness and wholeness to the world around us. And the word that's used often in the Quran is islah, to reform what was broken, to repair what was broken, to reform what was corrupted, to bring things whole after they have been ruined. And so we realize as we come together, the common enemy that we have in this world, which is divisive politics that supports selfish, elitist value over the overarching world welfare of everyone around us. And so profit over human welfare and stability and comfort. And that is our common enemy. And so that's why the Quran, in the context, in the chapter 5, verse 2, I will conclude with this very powerful verse of the Quran, which talked about how the Muslims had been expelled from their homeland in Mecca and sent out to live in Medina because those polytheist tribes there were disgusted by the fact that people would believe there is only one deity, and to rebuke the worship of idols, and to believe in a moral system in which there is no tribalism, in which there is no racism, in which there is no classism, in which there is a directive of human value seen on an equal playing field between male and female, and young and old, and rich and poor, that we all are here learning and experiencing life at each other's best interests rather than at the expense of each other's best interests. And so the verse says, after talking about that, God then says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. You must collectively cooperate with anyone and everyone, even those who expelled you from your homelands and oppressed you and abused you, on matters of righteousness and piety. But you are not allowed to cooperate with anyone on sin and enmity and hostility. If there is sin and enmity and hostility, we draw a line in the sand and we stand boldly and clearly on the side of truth and justice. We have to educate ourselves. We have to educate our neighbors. We have to come together and mobilize the masses in a grassroots effort that we may work to repair what was broken by the powers that be in the desire for profit of a worldly material nature, so that we may promote the profit of a spiritual nature, which brings goodness and wholeness to a world that was corrupted by people who do not know or follow God and his message. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Imam Ederer, and thank you, Rabbi Schindler, for showing us that in major faith traditions, that it is absolutely our responsibility to care for creation and help. Thank you for connecting it to caring for our neighbor. Love God, love your neighbor, love the earth. These things are all connected. So if we were in an auditorium, you would both hear a resounding round of applause, but we're still in Zoom land. So you just have to use your imaginations. And I want to, on behalf of our audience, on behalf of all the folks who are with us today, to say thank you so much for helping ground us in the connection between faith and creation care and our agency, our ability and power to be that voice for God's creation and to carry that into the realm of policy, which is so important, as well as into the realm of our community, and to work together to do that. You spoke of unity, both of you, and that it takes all of us